This is the story of how my husband took advantage of my going on frequent business trips by bringing another woman into our home. Mommy, please don't come home today. I can't believe I'm letting my little girl say this to me. I can't allow you to do this to my darling little girl. I decided to collude with a certain someone, and I vowed to take revenge on my husband. My name is Magdalena, also known as Maggie, and I'm 48 years old. After graduating from college, I was offered a job in a local company of my hometown, and as of now, I work for City Hall. I met my husband due to a friend of mine who introduced us out of concern for how much of a workaholic I was. Admittedly, a job was perhaps the only thing I initially planned to have. I never planned to have a husband, nor a child. But perhaps fate had other plans. Because soon, after we were introduced, Walter and I had our first date at a stylish cafe. I arrived 30 minutes earlier than the time we were supposed to meet, and I decided to wait for him with a cup of coffee. As evident by the fact that I mentioned we were already introduced, I'd already met the guy, but I wondered what kind of person Mr. Walter Busby was in private. I hoped he was a kind person. While I was thinking that to myself, a man came into the cafe, completely out of breath. He was coming straight toward me.
Are you Miss Magdalena?
Yes, I am. I was frankly a little puzzled because of his sudden appearance, but he responded with a smile.
Nice to see you again. I'm Walter.
It's nice to see you again. Thank you for taking some time today. Perhaps I stood up a bit too hurriedly because he giggled in amusement.
Oh, this is, I do beg your pardon. It was just a very, polite greeting from you, and I have to admit it was kind of cute.
He said as he smiled and took a seat. He then went on to order the same coffee as I did. My first impression of Walter was that he was of handsome appearance, with a very calm, very reassuring nature. I do admit I fell in love with him at first sight. There was just one thing that bothered me. May I ask you why you were stammering when you started talking to me, Mr. Busby? Walter went on to tell me, with a hint of embarrassment on his face.
Actually, I've seen photographs of you because of our mutual friend, and honestly, you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and now that you're in front of me, well, I couldn't help but be very nervous the first time we met, and when I saw you here, I hope I haven't made you uncomfortable.
As he said so, his agitated gaze, which flew around the room instead of focusing on me, now did focus on me.
I fell in love with you at first sight, you see. And my heart was pounding when I saw you, there in the cafe, drinking your coffee. If I was breathless, it wasn't because I was running. I sound cheesy, I know, but I'm trying to be honest with you. I love you. Will you do me the honor of becoming mine? I would be so happy, you see.
While a part of me was genuinely surprised by his sudden confession, a better part of me was overflowing with happiness. When I first met you, Mr. Busby, I thought you were a little strange, I'll be honest. But now that I've met you and talked with you a little, I must confess, I'm in love with you too. I know I would be so happy too if I became yours. Thank you so much. And that was how we started going out, and we went on many dates. 3 years later, we got married. Soon after our marriage, we were blessed with a child. We were supposed to be at the peak of our happiness at this point, but after our daughter Lily was born, my husband's behavior started to change, little by little. Walter works as a gym instructor, and he is always careful about what he eats. But since our daughter was born, I've been really busy with the childcare, and taking the time to take care of his meals had become a lot more difficult for me. Soon, he started to complain about anything and everything.
I'm so jealous of you, you know that. You get paid for maternity leave and get 3 meals a day with a nap included. And you're cooking my meals too. Man, I wish they had some kind of easygoing status like that for us puny little men bound to the workforce.
I can't believe you think that way. Honey, trying to raise my newborn daughter is far from easy too, you know? And I'm also doing my best to take care of the house while you're at work. We argued like this every day once upon a time. By the time my daughter was in elementary school, we'd pretty much become a couple that didn't interfere with each other whatsoever. My husband had the same charisma as that of the air that filled the living room. And while it did pain me to say this, paying attention to him had become a very hard thing to do. Such was our relationship, but he nonetheless loved our daughter very much. She was the sole reason we were still a family.
Hey, Lily. How's school these days, darling?
It's fun to study, Daddy. And I have a lot of friends at school.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot. You're going on a school trip starting tomorrow, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. You better look forward to seeing your souvenirs, Daddy. Her smile was one of pure joy and love once he heard that. But while my daughter was on her school trip, for some reason, he hardly ever comes home. Any sensible wife would wonder why. Why don't you ever come home anymore? When I asked him that, all he ever responded with was,
It's work. Nothing I can do about that now, can I?
My distrust towards my husband only grew with time. A few days later, I decided to take his clothes to the cleaners, and before I left for the cleaners, I went through all his pockets. That's when I found a small piece of folded paper. I unfolded it and discovered that it was a receipt from a certain inn. The reservation was for 2 people. My daughter was on a school trip, so that could only mean one thing. He had gone on an overnight affair with another woman while his daughter was away elsewhere. But at that time, I wasn't sure if my husband was cheating on me, so I decided against pursuing the matter by interrogating Walter. One day, my boss ordered me to go on an urgent business trip. I'm really sorry, Lily, sweetheart. Mommy has to go on an important business trip, and I won't be home for about 3 days. My daughter looks away, undoubtedly sad when she heard that. Daddy's also going to be busy with work that day, so how about going over to Grandma's place overnight? Would you like that, darling? Her face lighting up immediately was more than enough as an answer. I want to visit my grandma, Mommy. She has a big house, and there are rice paddies and gardens too. I love my grandma's house, and I want to go. My parents-in-law are vegetable farmers, and my daughter has always loved to help them harvest the vegetables, ever since she was a little girl. But because my husband, who hated insects, was not very good at harvesting himself, it was unfortunately rare to take our daughter to pay a visit to my parents-in-law. On the day of my business trip, Mrs. Busby, my mother-in-law, came to pick up my daughter. I'm so sorry I must impose your hospitality at such a busy time for you, Mrs. Busby. I only wish I wasn't so busy myself. Oh, don't worry about that, dear. Whenever our darling granddaughter comes to visit, she always brightens up our house. You're always welcome here, my dears. Yay! I love you, Grandma. Lily gets tickled pink upon hearing that. Most adorable sight I ever witnessed. Well, I'll see you in 3 days. I'll remind you to drive her back home if that isn't too much of a burden for you, Mrs. Busby. Thank you so much for your help. With that as my parting shot, I hugged my daughter, shouldered her luggage into Mrs. Busby's car, and waved them away before driving to the neighboring city where my business trip was. On the evening of the second day of my business trip, after I finished a good day's work, I was driving home when I received a call on my cell phone from my mother-in-law. I answered the phone and was greeted by my daughter's voice. It seemed that Lily had borrowed her grandmother's cell phone and called me. Hi, Mommy! We are almost home. Wait, what? Mommy's still on a business trip right now, honey. I'm supposed to be home tomorrow. Oh, really? Oopsie daisies. I'll ask Grandma. Wait a moment, madam. I giggled at that last part because she sounded exactly like a telemarketer. I then overheard her telling Mrs. Busby that I would be coming back tomorrow and not today. Then Mrs. Busby's sweet voice resonated in my ear. Oh dear, I've made a mistake, haven't I? I'm so sorry, my dear. And what should we do about Lily? Oh, Mrs. Busby, don't worry. To be honest with you, work went really smoothly this whole trip, and I'm actually on my way home right now. Oh, now that is music to my ears, my dear. I'll let Lily take the phone again, okay? She passed the phone back to Lily. Mommy, you're coming home, right? Yay! As my daughter and I continued to have a conversation, I decided to hurry on home. Mrs. Busby had pulled into the parking lot near our apartment, and I could hear them walking towards home. Hey, Mommy, what's for dinner tonight? I'm thinking of making your favorite, sweetheart, hamburgers. Her voice became so loud with excitement. That's literally the most angelic sound to hear as a mother. Your own child's squeal of excitement. Wouldn't you agree? While we were talking like that, I could tell they'd gotten home safe and sound because I could hear the sound of my front door opening. Okay, Mommy, we're home now. Wait, hold on. And then Lily went on to ask me a very strange question. Mommy, are you home already? Cocking an eyebrow, I responded by telling her I was still in the car on my way home. By this point, Mrs. Busby had immediately understood everything that was going on because she said loud enough that I could hear that there was a pair of women's shoes on the front porch. She also claimed she could hear a woman's voice coming from the end of the hallway. What my mother-in-law did next was very quick. She took her granddaughter back to the car, which she used to bring her home. Lily, my darling, listen to Grandma very carefully, okay? I'm going to go back to your house, and you're gonna stay in the car and keep on talking on the phone with your mommy, okay? After she told her that, she closed the door and locked the car. I can only assume she went back to the house. Everything I'm about to tell you is what Mrs. Busby experienced and what she told me right after she left Lily in the car. So, after climbing back up the stairs to Walter's apartment, where he lived with me, she quietly opened the front door. She quietly made for the place where she'd heard the woman's voice. It was none other than the bathroom, and from there she could unmistakably hear the voices of a woman and her son, Walter. From what she could hear, it seemed they were taking a bath together. Are you sure we can do this? Just because your wife is away on a business trip doesn't mean she won't find out.
Everything will be okay, darling. I'm divorcing her anyway, remember?
That's true. I can't wait to marry you, Walter, my darling. I love you so much. After hearing their conversation, Mrs. Busby was completely convinced that her own son was cheating on me, his wife. She quietly left the scene behind and returned to the car where her granddaughter was waiting. Lily seemed to actually realize what was going on because of her grandmother's behavior. Mommy, please don't come home today. What's wrong with you all of a sudden? Lily, darling, please tell me what's going on. Right at that moment, Mrs. Busby, with uncanny timing, asked Lily to give her the phone. Oh, Maggie, my dear. I'm so sorry. She then told me everything she just witnessed in my home. Oh, my dear Mrs. Busby, this is not something you should apologize for. You did nothing wrong. At all. I'm almost there. I'm only a few minutes away. If you could wait for a short while, we can sort this out together. I told her that, cut the line, and rushed to the place where I thought my daughter and mother-in-law were. Not 10 minutes later, I met up with the two of them. I'm home. Lily, darling. Mommy, welcome home. I have a favor to ask of you, sweetheart. Think you can do something for Mommy? After saying that, I told my daughter that she should wait for me at the house in the neighborhood that belonged to a friend of hers from school. She seemed to realize something because she seemed to force a smile as she replied, "Yeah. Okay, Mommy, I'll go there." It was a painful sight to see Lily with a facial expression like that. "I'm so sorry, darling." And so, we walked on, hand in hand, toward her friend's house. When we arrived, I explained the situation to Mrs. Frisk, the mother of Lily's friend, Gabriella, and a personal friend of my own. Before I left for my apartment, Lily said, "Mommy, please pick me up as soon as you can, okay?" I smiled, kissed her, and waved at her as I walked back toward our apartment building. My mother-in-law and I approached the apartment where my husband was having an affair with a woman. "Mrs. Busby, I cannot thank you enough." She was surprised by what I said. "When you entered the house with Lily, you found out about Walter's affair, did you not? But in order to not get Lily involved, you quickly took action and awaited my return. It was probably a very dangerous moment for Lily, and I felt I must deeply thank you for doing your best to protect her." In response, Mrs. Busby seemed to find it hard to meet my eyes, and she was about to cry. "Perhaps I did do what I thought was right, but at the end of the day, all I ever did was give you and darling Lily a very hard time. I cannot tell you how sorry I am." She bowed her head deeply as she tearfully apologized to me. "Oh, my dear Mrs. Busby, I'm absolutely fine." As I tell her so, I bring out the receipt from the inn that I'd found a few days earlier. I told her how I'd found the piece of paper inside the pocket of one of my husband's suits, and I told her that I suspected him of cheating on me ever since. "So, Walter was having an affair for quite a long time, it would seem. So the woman I discovered in your apartment today, I wonder if she's the one he was having the affair with when he went to that inn." "I'm thinking it was. I'm going to ask Walter to explain everything to me, including the receipt." And we were also going to uncover the relationship between Walter and this anonymous woman once and for all. In order to capture evidence, I turned on the camera of my cell phone and began recording a video. We quietly went inside the house. It was quiet, perhaps too quiet. My mother-in-law and I quietly opened the bedroom door, and lo and behold, we discover Walter, sound asleep next to an unfamiliar woman, sleeping peacefully on his chest. We took a couple more soundless steps inside before Mrs. Busby hollered, "Walter, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Even I jolted explosively at the sheer volume of her voice. She quickly wakes them up.
What are you doing here, Mum? And you, Maggie, you're supposed to be on a business trip, aren't you?
Walter was completely puzzled. The woman quickly slipped under the covers without saying a word. "You two need to give in. It's no use in making up excuses." Mrs. Busby's sweet voice was nowhere to be found, and she ripped the bedsheets off the woman. I was quick to capture the scene on video. "Why the hell are you taking videos for? I'm going to sue you for defamation." The woman screamed as her lover beside her desperately tried to put on his underwear. I was so disgusted by this indescribable scene that I felt like throwing up right then and there. I tell them, "Both of you, once you put some decent clothes on, you can sit right here," as I point to the floor. "Hell no, bitch!" Mrs. Busby snapped. "I don't give a good goddamn what you want to do. You are going to sit down right here." The fury and fierceness in her voice eventually pushed the stubborn, unwilling, unfaithful woman to obey my instructions. "You, who the frick is this woman?"
I just met her today, you see.
As my husband started making up excuses, the woman snaps at him. What the hell? What are you talking about? We've been together for a year now, haven't we? Just after she said that, she started bragging about her love story with my idiot husband. Walter and I have been dating on the premise of marriage. We even took a trip to celebrate our 1-year anniversary last month. You see? The woman continued as she embraced her lover's arm. You and Walter better get a divorce soon. I suppose you do understand that if you don't divorce my darling, we can't get married, right? Hearing these words, my husband's face grows deathly pale.
Maggie, listen to me. That was just a joke. Don't take it seriously.
I'm not kidding. You said you'd marry me. You said you would, time and time again. Walter shoulders away from the woman's grasp and begins to plead desperately.
The only woman I love, the only woman I've ever loved is you, Maggie. Please believe me.
As he said so, he gets down on his knees. I didn't feel a single thing when I saw him in this vulnerable state, and I was in a state of calm so complete that I even surprised myself. You are so damn disgusting. The air in the room got drastically colder with those 5 words. Listen up, Mr. Busby. I'm going to give this woman what she wants, and I'm going to divorce you. Try to get that through that blockhead of yours. What exactly am I so angry about?
You say you're angry because I cheated on you, right? Yeah. Okay, I cheated on you, so what? It's all your fault, since you were never an attractive woman to begin with. Why don't you reflect on that, eh?
I can't believe I'm hearing these words of his, especially at this time. I glared at my husband with disdain. Answer me this. Why do you think your mother is here?
Because she was taking care of Lily while you were away on a business trip.
As he was saying that, he seemed to have realized something. His tone turned into one of panic.
Don't tell me you brought Lily come back to this house, Mum.
Mrs. Busby, with her arms crossed, answered with the cold, hard truth. Yeah, I did. I made a genuine mistake, and I thought Maggie had instructed me to drop Lily off at her home today. And right as we walked in through the front door, we uncovered the truth about you. You goddamn bastard! Mrs. Busby was just about to raise her hand, as if to slap her son, but I stopped her and calmed her down. Oh, Mrs. Busby, it's all right now. I decided to tell my husband on behalf of my mother-in-law. Thanks to your mother's uncanny tactfulness, your daughter never saw you having an affair with this woman. Walter was visibly relieved, and I continued. Lily is now in the care of a friend of mine from her school.
If Lily doesn't know anything, we can still start over, can't we? Please. Please.
This particular conversation aroused heavy breathing on the part of the woman. She interrupts by saying, The hell you mean we can still start over? What about our marriage? What about all the children you promised you would give me? And what about our amazing life together we dreamed of? With a disgusted look on my face, I tell the woman, Oh, don't worry, we're getting a divorce. But honestly, I think you should be more worried about the alimony you're going to have to pay me. And why the hell should I have to pay anything to the likes of you? She started throwing a stupid tantrum right then and there, and Mrs. Busby forcefully grabbed her by the arm and literally dragged her out of the room. My husband followed her out as though he was chasing after her. I then went back to where my daughter was right after this interaction. She rushed to answer the door as soon as I pressed the doorbell. Sorry to have kept you waiting, darling. Shall we go home then? Yes, please. I thanked Mrs. Frisk numerous times for taking care of her while I did what I had to do. We then left their house, but I didn't want to go back to that apartment, the very same that Walter had used to cheat on me with. I decided to stay in a hotel for a while with my daughter. After a while, my husband and I got divorced without a hitch, and he now pays me child support. As for the alimony, because he'd hurt my daughter, I demanded a larger amount than what was deemed conventional. At first, he refused to pay the alimony, but out of guilt for his daughter, he reluctantly decided to pay after all. After that, the woman whom he had an affair with stormed his workplace. "Walter, what the hell are you doing? Stupid! Why are you paying such a large sum of money to that bitch of an ex-wife of yours? What are you going to do with your marriage to me, huh?" That's what she shouted, and it caused a commotion. This caused Walter's job to find out that he divorced his wife because of an act of adultery. The gym had always sold a clean image, and the fact that he had caused its reputation to be called into question made the executives furious. Walter was fired on the spot. Of course, there was more to it than that. The woman, whose name ironically turned out to be Patience, illegally brushed past security guards and broke into her husband's workplace without proper clearance. She was taken in for questioning by the police under alleged suspicion of trespassing. As a result of this, she was also fired from her job as a full-time pastry chef at a local restaurant, I heard. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not even going to lose a single penny of the compensation. As for Walter, in order to pay the great amount of child support and alimony, he decided to go back to his parents' house to devote himself to his family's vegetable farm, which was actually a very good business. Although he's the heir to inherit the family business, he is still an amateur in farming. Knowledge and experience. And Mrs. Busby tells me jokingly that he is being given a hard time by the more experienced workers, who are all younger than him themselves. My parents-in-law admitted they were relieved that their heir has returned, regardless of the reason why he did it. "Don't let your darling Lily be ashamed of her own father, son." That is what Walter hears every day as he frantically tries to keep up with farming work and learn how to run the business smoothly. My relationship with my parents-in-law still continues, and my daughter keeps in touch with them through letters and text messages. We still meet at least once a year for dinner, and we catch up on what's going on with each other. However, my ex-husband is not allowed to attend these dinners, as per his own daughter's request. My daughter loved her father very much, once upon a time, and she's not willing to forgive him for his betrayal just yet. The reality is that she has lost her father, but I promised myself that I would raise her with all the loving care she deserves in the world. I vow to provide her with everything she'll ever need to grow into a beautiful, compassionate, independent woman.
All right, everyone's presentations are done.
Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward.
Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak.
There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer.
Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email.
Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly.
The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk.
He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale.
Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam.
My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father.
Well, you could hardly call it being raised.
After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing.
Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account.
Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out.
I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything.
The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke.
Take care. That was our last conversation.
Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment.
Yet, my father never visited me even once.
I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education.
Listen up.
Our work can change the future of our employees.
Don't drag us down.
On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly.
There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses.
It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. "Probably Sam." Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. "Do you know how much revenue we get from that company?" "We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs. Gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized." Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. "All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason." "What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do." "I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you." "Please." Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me.
If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next.
Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation.
If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor.
I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room.
"What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner.
No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread,
hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry.
Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology.
He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?"
Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason.
"I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him."
Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand.
"I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42.
Everything I've done proves I was right.
So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor.
"Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside.
"Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part."
I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers.
Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone.
It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show.
Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation.
The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared.
Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment?
Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance.
Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too.
It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load.
I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too.
I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.